Good evening, everyone. I have Senator Kim Pate to join us this evening. Welcome, Kim. This is a great pleasure to have you on tonight.
It's wonderful to join you. I come to you from the shores of the Kitchissippi in the unceded, unsurrendered territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe. Thank you very much for inviting me.
Yes, thank you. It's a great pleasure. I had the former minister for BC NDP, Mr. Shane Simpson, on. And he was going over a little bit about it, but I told him that you were coming on, and so I'd love to have your take on everything that's going on and let everybody know what's happening.
You invited me, I know, because I have been putting out in social media, and this week I spoke at second reading to the bill S-233, which is the mate of, if you will, the sister of Bill C-233, which was introduced, not 223, that was introduced by Leah Gazan, First Nations Member of Parliament from Treaty 1 territory in Winnipeg. And she introduced the same bill. And basically it's to urge the government to lay out a framework. And as we've seen during this pandemic, when the government needed to roll out money, they could do it through the revenue system. And we already really have a couple of forms of basic income. One, the child benefit for families with children. And second, we have the guaranteed income supplement for seniors. And those were both brought in place because of the poverty that children and seniors were living in. And so the government in last Parliament said that they would be introducing a disability benefit, which is another step in the right direction. We'd like to see a benefit for all folks, not one that goes to like a demo grant to every single person in the country, because people who have resources and stable incomes don't need that, but one that's universally accessible to those who fall below income levels that are that are not sustainable in terms of their lives. And so it wouldn't be cutting other social programs, it wouldn't be cutting housing, it wouldn't be cutting any of those. In fact, it would be along with increasing supports for things like pharmacare, dental care, health care, particularly mental health care, eye care, and that sort of thing. And so really it's the idea of, instead of having the judgmental approach that happens now, where myths and stereotypes about poor people are invoked and poor people are blamed for being poor, and as we've seen even during this pandemic, only workers, people who had previously been working, were entitled to some of the resources. So that left out whole swaths of people, everybody from people with disabilities to young people leaving care to artists to gig workers, and on we went. And so there were a lot of people who were left out. So we have to look at also income redistribution, and many people will say, well, how are you going to pay for it? Well, many of the colleagues I work with who have worked in business areas and tax issues have talked about everything from the fact that we could redistribute tax, and those people who now take a lot of their money offshore, put it in offshore accounts, if they pay taxes on just that, we could fund a basic income initiative. If we then add in the money laundering that happens, and Senator Vern White and Senator Campbell have done a fair bit of work on this, if we took in, address those issues, if we took into account the corporate supports that have been put in place, there's all kinds of ways we could pay for it. That the parliamentary budget officers looked at some, the Basic Income Canada Network has looked at some, and what the same bill, but in the House of Commons and the Senate, that Leah and I have introduced, would say is, let's look at all of those issues, address how do we actually pay for it, how do we set it up, how do we negotiate with the provinces, because social assistance, pharmacare, healthcare are all part of a provincial jurisdiction, but there's cost sharing agreements through the health transfers, and so we could be setting up national guidelines and standards about how that money is provided by the federal government from tax dollars. And then finally, when people say, well, it's taking money out, we are spending, nobody seems to be questioning the millions, not just millions, tens of billions of dollars we're spending to keep people in poverty right now. And we know from the child benefit research and from some of the other initiatives that the government has taken, that for every dollar put into an initiative like a basic income, a guaranteed livable basic income, it generates at least $2 of economic stimulation within the community, because people who don't have a lot of money, guess what? They're spending their money on food, on clothing, on housing, on the things in the community. They're not sending it offshore to offshore accounts and trying to avoid taxes. They're actually investing in and stimulating the economy. So that's some of what we're trying to do, and I'm very, very, very grateful for you for your interest and for wanting to talk about this. So I'll shut up now so that if you have questions, I can try and do my best to answer them or try and find the answers.
Oh, it's all good, Kim. And you know that you nailed it on the part where offshore money, right? And like it's about priorities on basically upper government, right? I mean, as Peter Julian said when he had him on my show, he said it took 4 days. He says to give the top 6 banks $750 billion. I mean, he said $250 billion. He says 4 days, and so I mean that much money. I mean, wow, that could have really. They paid their, the GLBI over. I mean, many times over, right? I mean, it's going to generate the money back in, and I guess the one question I have is, so like the question gets passed to me all the time is, they'll say, well, what the GLBI and the Canada Disability Benefit? They think it's like two like separate things, and I said, well, I think it's all going to get rolled into one.
Right. Well, right now it's not being rolled into one. Right now it's piecemeal. It's incremental steps. And I'm certainly not against the disability benefit. Far from it. I think though there's an opportunity to, instead of creating yet another schism between people of who's deserving of support and who's not, who has a disability and who doesn't.
Absolutely, Kim, and that's the part that I'm hearing from so many people. They're worried about the other one, the other program, the Canada Disability Benefit. Yes. On the Liberals' part, is because like I had Minister Shane Simpson on, and he was talking about the difference on it, but there's a lot of concerns, right? And rightfully so, because people missed out on the DTC. There was a $600 payment, right? And it never went to everybody. It went to like maybe 1.7 million out of over 6 million disabled across the country. But they said they made a mistake. They it was Canada Revenue Agency. I guess they couldn't figure out how to get it through or whatever the reason was. But they still. Okay, so now they know what the problem is. They still didn't get the money out there.
Right.
So it's a hurdle, right? Mm-hmm. Because not everybody qualifies for a DTC, or maybe they can't get a doctor too, and because you have to prove that you still have a disability.
Right.
I mean, it doesn't go away. Like you said, and that's the part I hear from so many people all the time, and they're like, "Why?" And I go, "Because it's a hoop that you got to jump through, and you shouldn't have to in order to qualify." And then I think people want to have something guaranteed, right? Mm-hmm. They want to know for sure that they're going to have it, and as a top-up. And that's what Mr. Simpson was saying, is it would be a top-up to existing provincial programs, because then people want to make sure their medical, their dental, their eye care, everything's in place that they need. And provincial they have to have that in place, so that will stay in place. So he said they just have to try to get it right. And but I said, well, we don't need a 3-year study. He goes, no, we don't need a 3-year study. I mean, people are suffering now, and I don't know in the meantime, Kim, like what would happen. Like, I mean, once we get this bill going through, hopefully that they do not turn it down, right? I'm going to keep advocating and pushing and do what I can on my end too. But what I'm wondering is, in the intern, like, I mean, with inflation, cost of living up so high, is like, I don't know if there's like an intern that they will do something for people in the meantime while they get it going.
Well, I sure hope they will, but I share your concern. I think that it's one thing for governments or bureaucrats to say, well, we have to plan it out and get it right. Well, they rolled within a matter of very few days and weeks. They rolled out the Canada Emergency Response Benefit, and I think we can do the same thing. And when some people are saying, oh, well, that interfered with the labor market? No, it didn't. In fact, the employment rate is higher than pre-pandemic. And so I think we have to keep countering that misinformation.
Does anyone have any questions for Kim? Okay, Ariana, you want to go ahead first? Jeff and Jesse, anyone? Yeah, Ariana, you go ahead first.
Hi, I'm just wondering, okay, because we have Leah's bill and then your bill. Does your bill have a better chance at actually making it because it's at the Senate level? Or I know Leah gets to have the second reading too, so I'm just wondering how that works.
Very good question. It's unusual what we did. Usually every bill has to go through both houses of Parliament. So if it starts in the House of Commons, it then has to come through the Senate and vice versa. And so part of the reason we did it together is we wanted to stress how important this that there were cross-chamber. There's a cross-chamber, a multi-party, all-party anti-poverty caucus, and she's part of it, so are a number of other MPs and senators. And so we wanted to really push it forward. It's exactly the same bill introduced in both houses, and whichever one passes it first, it will go to the other. But this way we can be all talking about it at the same time and trying to stress how important it is to move forward.
Neil, do you have a question for Kim?
Neil Matheson? There's two Neils now.
Neil Matheson. Kim,
Yeah.
Neil Matheson, he's my editor, my producer and editor for this, for my group here.
Fantastic.
Yeah, he does all the audio stuff. So once it's all done, I will send you a copy and you'll see his magic, what he does.
Hopefully it's magic anyway. I didn't have too many questions. I just had, I don't know, maybe it's a simple question, I don't know, but I've often wondered, as an advocate, I've been fighting the government here for clawbacks, and I've always used the argument, or at least I started using the argument about our Canadian Charter, the Section 15, about the amelioration, that all legislation must ameliorate and boost up populations that are vulnerable. And I just wanted to get your take on how it is that governments, both provincial and federal, can seem to stomp all over our charter and kind of disrespect the definitions of amelioration and what that's supposed to mean, and how clawbacks and improper, what seems to be kind of unfair or improper legislation can go forward and doesn't seem to respect the spirit of the charter.
Yeah. I wish I could answer that. The best that I can say is, in my limited experiences and now in politics as a public servant, because I consider any of us who enter into this, whether it's senators or members of Parliament, as public servants, we are, I think it's the myths and stereotypes, the misinformation that gets put out about people. I can't explain it any other way, because how could it be that courts would allow discriminatory approaches, policies, legislation, not only to be first put in place in the first place, but then to be continued even after they've been shown that it's discriminatory? And I think part of it is I wish it was otherwise, and we're all working to make it otherwise. But sometimes certain people's lives seem to be valued over others, and that's just wrong. And so Section 15, I agree, requires us to do that. It's part of the reason when I was approached about the people who wanted to put my name forward with the Senate, that I became interested, because part of the role of senators is to represent those who aren't represented in the House of Commons by elected officials, often because they are in groups that are considered marginalized, or, as the young people in the On Canada group have schooled me, should really be called the intentionally ignored groups, because they aren't often the ones that are seen as the influential enough to get people elected. And I think all of that is wrong. So I take very seriously our responsibility to represent, amplify, or give voice to those who are otherwise rendered voiceless.